we will now be talking about different theories of social change. Changes which had started coming in from the Renaissance of the 12th to 13th centuries, went through the development of trade and commerce in 15th and 16th and early 17th centuries, and given a totally new direction, a totally unthinkable impetus at the beginning of what he called the Industrial Revolution in the middle of 18th century. And all these changes awakened the spirit of inquiry in the minds of European sociologists of the 19th century. They all thought change to be inevitable. So they were not much into theorizing about change as such. They are not trying to understand why and how changes are taking place, but rather they bent on giving us a philosophical interpretation of the historical development of changing society. Each had his own philosophical interpretation. They're more into some kind of a narrative rather than into some kind of a theory. But still hidden within such narratives lay important theoretical insights which are relevant even today. And that's why, as we are now have completed the first decade of the 21st century, we still find such theorists of social change relevant for a discussion of or about social change as such. Tom Baltimore, one of the most perceptive sociologists of the present times, had remarked about these theorists of social change of 19th century Europe that they all recognized the particular significance of the changes which occurred in Europe from 17th century and which subsequently influenced the social life of mankind throughout the world, the development of modern science and industry. So to Baltimore, the importance lay not in the fact they are narrating the course of social change in Europe, but also in the fact they are trying to show how the impact or the consequences of such changes happening primarily in Europe did spread throughout the world and sooner or later brought about fundamental transformations also in the extra-European world. And that was their most important contribution. Starting from Europe, they are trying to explain how changes came about throughout the world. Now, these theories can broadly be divided into two categories: linear theories and cyclical theories. The terms themselves, linear and cyclical, do tell us something about the nature of such theories, even before we go into the details of them. The linear, of course, believed in some kind of a progression from stage 1 to the final stage, some kind of a journey over time, some kind of stepping one step at a time towards a final goal, and this followed a movement towards a final goal, no backing, no turning back, no deviating, and that's why it has been labeled as a linear theory of social change. Among those who contributed to the linear theory were foremost thinkers of the 19th and early 20th century: Auguste Comte, Karl Marx, Herbert Spencer, and L.T. Hobbhouse are the most important ones of them. We'll try to consider them. We'll try to consider their views separately but shortly, in a brief manner, one by one. Let's start with the French philosopher Auguste Comte. The spelling C-O-M-T-E. Auguste Comte lived between 1798 and 1857. The time does tell us a story. 1798 comes just after 1789, the French Revolution. And as Comte was growing up in post-revolutionary France, he found enough of disorder all around him to disturb his intellectual mind. He was concerned with the fact that though there are new ideas, though the monarchy had been replaced, the people have come to power, though some kind of a rudimentary republic is in place, that is all by themselves, these are all very important changes. Freedom has come, the slogans liberty, equality, and fraternity have become the buzzword. But in the face of so much of material and cultural poverty, and there was no institution to organize, to absorb, to accommodate, to institutionalize, to give an orderly shape to the new ideas coming up very fast in society. And the result was some kind of a social chaos. And that disturbed Auguste Comte. Now, Comte believed that following the developments of the pre-revolutionary France, revolution itself, and the post-revolutionary France, Comte came to believe that social change is always the outcome of intellectual development. Man's capacity to understand the world, man's capacity to explain the world, man's capacity to reason have been changing. To put it shortly, Comte believed in three stages of development in which man's intellectual world has been transformed from theological state to the metaphysical state and finally to the positive stage. The terms theological sort of explains itself. Theological stage was dominated by religious considerations guided by scriptures of whatever religion that may be. The metaphysical referred to a kind of attitude which tried to philosophize, which tried to idealize the reality around us, or tried to discover philosophy from fact, or even tried to give more importance to ideal over the reality. What should be was the key concept in the metaphysical stage of intellectual development and not what is. As in the first stage, the theological stage, the stress was on what did the scriptures say. The stress was on the Lord's reason, the Lord's rule, the divine law, something like that. The positive means a state of mind trained by science. Positive means a stress on what is the reality. Positive means a moving down from the idealistic world of what should be into the ground level of what is. That's empiricism, finding reality in facts. Now, these developments from theological to metaphysical to positive was paralleled by a development of altruism in human mind. There's development of morality in human mind. Some kind of development from savagery to civilization. People are becoming more and more reason guided, not faith directed, but reason guided. And the world became a rational world. Kant was witnessing the birth of that rational world in the post-revolutionary France and post-industrial revolution Europe. But Kant was perhaps too optimistic about the rationality of human beings, about the important place assigned to reason in running of the entire society, because often unreason rather than reason, passion rather than cool and collected empirical ideas rule the time. So it's not always that in the stage of in the final stage of positivism, everything will be reason guided, as Kant so hopefully believed. So there will be an important role, and there is actually an important role played by emotion, passion, and unreason, which sometimes surpass the role played by reason, which might contradict Kant to some extent. But Kant was otherwise near the truth when he tried to delineate the course of development of human history from theological, metaphysical to the positive stage of development. From Kant, we travel to Herbert Spencer. Herbert Spencer was a British thinker, and his lifespan was from 1820 to 1903. Spencer believed in evolution. And around the time, Spencer was just following the footsteps of another important intellectual personality of the time, Charles Darwin, the father of the evolutionary theory. And Spencer was every bit of an empiricist. We'll get the idea if we just listen to what he was trying to tell us. I quote Spencer. The thing it really concerns us to know is the natural history of society. We want all the facts which help us to understand how a nation has grown and organized itself. So his stress was only and solely on facts, and that's empiricism. His stress was not on belief or faith. And he spelled out the various aspects of fact which one has to collect if one wanted to know about social change, if wanted to explain the course of social change European societies were witnessing or going through at that point of time. Facts related to local as well as central government, facts related to church organizations, facts related to the system of classes, the family system, the economic system, the means of communication, the nature of art and culture, facts throughout the society, facts revealing everything about the society of the time, and such facts should be arranged in logical manner, to show that society was evolving just as animal organisms, according to Charles Darwin, evolved from the most simple, most primitive single-cell amoeba to the highly complex multiple-cell human beings. So according to Spencer, society too developed in that manner from the most simple, most primitive to the most complex state in which Europe found itself in Spencer's time. Thus, in Spencer we find that social change was a journey from undifferentiated homogeneity to differentiated heterogeneity. The single-cell amoeba in organic world represented that undifferentiated homogeneity. And the varieties of animals which we find now represent the differentiated heterogeneity. Similarly for societies, the kind of societies we found, we would have seen in such societies, in such primitive societies, that a single person was fulfilling so many roles. The leader of the group was at the same time the most powerful man physically, the best soldier, the lawgiver, the judge, everything combined into one, and almost, and in all times maybe, the owner of the largest amount of property. So that was some kind of homogeneity, undifferentiated, no differentiation was there. And as we moved through the different stages of social development, more and more differentiation took place. More and more, which much later on, one of the political scientists of a time, Gabriel Ellman, labeled as more and more specialization took place, and society became more and more complex, and that was social change which Herbert Spencer was trying to understand, following the footsteps or following almost a parallel line the ideas put forward by Charles Darwin, who came about the same time as Herbert Spencer was. So we find Spencer to be the first and foremost of which you call the evolutionary theorist of social change. Comte too talked about some kind of evolutionary change, but Spencer was throughout his writings an all-out evolutionist, believed in evolution. From Herbert Spencer, we move over to another British thinker, almost at the same time, L.T. Hobbhouse. Hobbhouse's time or span of life was between 1864 to 1929. In that sense, he came a bit later. Hobbhouse was also an evolutionist as Spencer was. Hobbhouse was also an empiricist as Spencer was. And Hobbhouse was also a great admirer, a great follower of the evolutionary principles laid down by Charles Darwin. Hobbhouse believed that facts are central to our life, and we must build all our theoretical frameworks, all our explanatory frameworks solely and only on the basis of facts. And facts about social life should constitute any theory about social change. Hobbhouse, like Spencer, also believed that society had over a long period of time moved from the most simple to the most complex, at least the kind of complexity which he found in his time. Now, Hobbhouse was not just an empiricist like or evolutionist like Herbert Spencer, but somehow he had in his intellectual horizon both Auguste Comte and Herbert Spencer, and tried to build up his own theory on some kind of a mixture of Comte's ideas as well as those of Herbert Spencer. From Spencer, Hobbhouse got the inspiration for a belief on evolution from the most simple to the most differentiated, the most complex. And from Comte, he borrowed the idea of moral development as man and society progressed from most simple to most complex. So this development was not simply in the factual or real world of our life, not simply how we cooked, how we stored our food, what kind of weapon we used, what kind of habitat we built, but at the same time, how we felt, how we thought about issues, and how we tried to put them down as our ideas. In a word, both moral and intellectual development as well as material development over a long period of time, from simple to the complex, from primitive to the modern, constituted the core of Hobbhouse's ideas of social change or social development. Hobbhouse differentiated 5 stages of social development, starting from pre-literate societies at the first stage and coming finally to the modern society infused with scientific and technological ideas. The we who belong to 21st century would perhaps believe 19th century to be some kind of a primitive society, and we are much more modern, much more advanced as far as our life, our thoughts are concerned. But Spencer, Comte, and Hobbhouse, they're all dealing with the societies in which they lived and wrote. And there, Hobbhouse found in both Comte and Spencer good and very usable explanatory variables. From Comte, he took the idea of moral development of man, intellectual development of man as mankind progressed through time. From Spencer, he took the idea that we should concentrate on empirically observable, empirically verifiable facts of life, facts which change over time, and fuse them together, moral development as well as material progress, fuse them together to show how society was progressing, society was following a linear path to more and more progress to the final stage which he thought to be his society was representing. So we find 3 important social thinkers, sociologists of the 19th century, starting with Auguste Comte, who has been called the founding father of sociology, then Herbert Spencer, who believed in social evolution, and then L.T. Hobbhouse, who tried to combine Comte and Spencer together in his own intellectual framework. 3 important thinkers, each one in their own ways trying to narrate the course of changes which European societies were undergoing since the day one of its civilization, and trying to find out how and why such changes are taking place. It's right that they were concerned with societies they lived in. It is right that their theories had a temporal limitation, also a spatial limitation. But we cannot question the relevance of ideas of Comte, Spencer, and Hobbhouse, even when we try to understand our societies, even when we try to understand the progress we have made from the days of Comte, Spencer, Hobbhouse, and down to our present days.